Yeah, my head hasn't stopped swimming about this for a couple of days, and I don't know, either I'm on something or I'm on to something. I don't know. I don't think it's I think the Trump tariff thing is a ruse, honestly. I think it's a scheme that he is using for other reasons. And if you'll indulge me, Dunnigan, once in a while on your show I get on these rants, and it's hard for me not to rant about this in order to set the stage properly. And for those people who've heard me talk about this over the last 24 hours, well, this will be redundant because this is all I'm focusing on right now. And I think it's much bigger than people think. Look at the moves that he's been making that are shocking everyone, right? And rightfully so. So much of what he is doing is bringing back the ideals of this country, largely, meritocracy over lifestyle and all the things that I've ranted about as someone who's built success by outworking and doing it from nothing, from scratch. That the concept of lifestyle over merit bothered me, and these things are ingratiating him, and I think people are shocked at what they're seeing, and part of me feels like we haven't seen anything yet in terms of shock. So let's kind of set the stage just a little bit and work our way through it, and you tell me if you think these dots connect as well. I have spoken with you about the tier one revision of gold. That's where it all started. Late 2019, we're talking gold being revised as tier one and the significance of that. Along the lines of tier one revision, we talked about the central banks that front ran that. Obviously, they were told by the BIS that gold will be revised. In 2017, starting with the Bundesbank, we had all the central banks repatriate their gold. The Bundesbank, Bank of Hungary, Turkey, Poland, the Czech National Bank, the Dutch National Bank, the Bank of Austria. They all brought their gold back and then went on a buying spree, buying more gold in 2018 than they did combined in the 60 years previously. And then 2019, they doubled that amount. And then lo and behold, miraculously, gold was revalued. And it was revalued as the only other tier one asset in the world. And that's really the bottom line why the central banks have been buying it and repatriating it, is that it's on par with treasuries, but doesn't have the drawbacks of the treasury market, largely inflation risks, default risk, sanction risk, which have all proven to be wise decisions by the banks and the big central banks that have accumulated gold and shed U.S. treasuries. And that's been going on for quite some time. We've talked about that. Now, I'm going to warn you, through all these years, through the stupidity of our suppression, the United States has been a net exporter of gold. The gold was leaving the COMEX, and so was the LBMA leaving. And we surmised, and it's funny, when there was that huge amount of gold shipped out of the exchanges in 2024, I think might have been 23, the article from Bloomberg is like, yeah, well, 40% of it, we're not sure who bought it. Well, the same thing is happening here today. They say a lot of the gold that's flowing, the majority of it, they don't know who's buying it. And a lot of that is because these countries are buying through sovereign wealth funds, which don't need to be reported to the IMF the way that it would if the PBOC bought it, or the any of the central banks. They have an obligation to report it. And we've talked about how they've been sidestepping and skirting that by not reporting it. Oh, sorry, we made a mistake. Saudi Arabia and China, articles say they've been buying 10 times the amount of gold than they report. And of course, we've talked a lot about the rise of the others. And I discovered that in 2020 with you, how the Commitment of Traders report that comes out of the COMEX, the publishing of the largest traders on the COMEX, has always been two-sided. One was the speculators or the hedge funds, and the other was the commercial specs. One goes long, one goes short. And we saw in 2020, all of a sudden, the COMEX published a third branch or third group of reportables called the others, sovereign wealth funds. And they've been slowly draining these exchanges. We've talked about that ad nauseum on your show. And so for the past several years, due to the stupidity of the previous administration, letting the metals continue to be suppressed, they had created a situation where the cupboards were being emptied in very creative ways. And we see the creativity where China goes directly to the miners and buys doré and concentrate, so it's not recorded. And through sovereign wealth funds, or if the People's Liberation Army buys it, it's not reported. We haven't updated our gold holdings since, or audited it since 56. No one wants to tell anyone how much gold they're buying. But by and large, it was undisputable. The United States was a net exporter of gold. Something is changing at a level that I have never seen ever in 35 years of business, ever, never. And I think it's really important that we kind of dig into it and look at a bigger picture. Before I do that, let's remember what a few things that we've also talked about. We talked about Judy Shelton and her book. And I interviewed Judy, and she talked about her desire to make 50-year treasuries backed by gold. And that she said, Trump and I discussed it in 2016 as she was his nominee to run the Federal Reserve, although not confirmed, still was an advisor. And I suppose she'll probably end up being on the Federal Reserve Board during his administration, maybe even taking over for Powell. We'll see. But she said Andy, Trump will issue most likely 50-year treasuries backed by gold on July 4th, 2026, the 250th year anniversary of the country. And of course, I asked her about auditing Fort Knox, and she said it should be done. The excuses that have been given are stupid. Where the United States spend a few $million, their question or their concerns over logistics are stupid. Let's get it done. It will inspire confidence. She said that. I said, Judy, do you know gold is held in an account called the Gold Revaluation Account? We've talked about this on your show a lot. That's the name of the account that all these central banks hold their gold in, the revaluation account. We've talked about how the head of the Dutch National Bank says, give us the ability to revalue gold to offset our liabilities. Members of the Bundesbank, give us the ability to revalue our gold to normalize our balance sheet, offset our liabilities. Cynthia Loomis, the senator from Wyoming, who advocates for revaluing gold in the gold revaluation account to pay for the strategic Bitcoin account. She said that in Tennessee. All of this should not be new news to everyone. Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, just came out the other day and said, gold is my largest personal holding. We've talked about that, but what we haven't talked about is he said, I want to monetize the asset side of the balance sheet. He just said that yesterday or the day before. Now, what we have talked about on your show is the stupidity and the nausea that washes over someone when they look at the United States balance sheet. Our government has about $5 trillion in assets, the largest of which is student debt. We've talked about that. About 40% of the asset base of the United States is the debt of our children, which you can't even bankrupt yourself out of. A law was passed half a dozen years ago or so that says even if you file bankruptcy, they'll take your Social Security. So that's our largest asset. We can't monetize that. Well, next is military bases and planes and bullets. Can't really monetize that. Next is land. I suppose we could. But how about the gold held in the gold revaluation account? I asked Judy, do you think they'll revalue gold? She's not in so many words said, yes, I do. I do think that they will. And others that I've asked that I've interviewed with or interviewed, and usually the question I ask, do you think it'll happen all at once or slowly? Most of the people say slowly, like we've been seeing up and up and up and up, which is gaining no attention by anyone mainstream whatsoever. Maybe we'll see. But let's now talk about what you're talking about. I want to lay the foundation. How many people know that since November, what happened in November? Oh yeah, it was the election, right? Since November, the United States has become a net importer of gold. Not since the inauguration, but since November. Are people in the know understanding what's coming? So since November, we've become a net importer of gold. JP Morgan is set to deliver $4 billion in gold to the COMEX for the February contract, one of the largest shipments ever. Now, who's got that kind of bread? Now, Blythe Masters used to run their trading desk, and there are videos out there of her saying JP Morgan does not buy for a house account, they buy for clients. What kind of clients got $4 billion to drop on gold? Could it be the Federal Reserve or the U.S. government? One of the largest shipments ever. Since November, 12.5 million ounces of gold and over 40 to 45 million ounces of silver have moved from the London vaults to the U.S. vaults because everyone is saying it's tariffs. To me, it appears that the Federal Reserve is accumulating physical gold and silver for a bigger reason, maybe part of a sovereign wealth fund strategy, maybe something bigger. Now, we talk about London, and we look at London, and they are supposed to be T+1 settlement. They're now T+6 to 8 weeks. That's a default. Give me my gold in 1 day. No, it's going to be 6 to 8 weeks. What do you mean 6 to 8 weeks? It's T+1. Sorry, we're backed up. BS. They're backed up. Something's bigger happening right here in front of us. Get this. When you talk about signs of stress in the paper gold system, the February contract on COMEX has seen deliveries, stand for delivery, of 59,296 contracts. That is by far the largest delivery ever at COMEX. The previous record was in the middle of the QE to infinity nausea in June 2020. It was 47,132. This is 12,167 contracts more than the largest ever. That's 5,929,600 ounces. Try multiplying that times 2,900 and your calculator will go E. It's too big for your calculator to tell you what the number is. 2,747 silver contracts in February, or 427 tons, 13,735,000 ounces, all coming to New York because of the tariff threat. Or is it the tariff threat? Could it be a ruse, perhaps? Along those same lines, somewhere in the neighborhood of November, I always bitched about the fact that JP Morgan paid a $920 million fine for manipulating the metals market and somehow still got to be the custodian of the world's largest silver trust, SLV, they and BlackRock, amongst other ETFs that they own in London and around the world, gold and silver ETFs. It was HSBC Bank that always controlled GLD. But guess somewhere in the last few months who just took control of GLD? Oh my goodness, it's none other than JP Morgan, the fox guarding the hen house. So you have JP Morgan and BlackRock now in custody of the largest silver trust in the world and one of the largest gold stockpiles in the world, amongst other ETFs. And what have I always said when people say, do you think gold will be confiscated? I said, no, I think they'll take the ETFs because we can't take possession of the ETFs. The commercial banks can. I'm going to talk about that in 1 second. But instead, they could take all of that gold and silver, look the world in the face and say, look, we didn't default on anything. We didn't take gold from our citizens. It's not illegal to own it. Physical gold ownership is just fine. All we did is close the ETFs. The prospectus gives us the right to do that. No laws broken, no civil liberties infringed. Sorry. And they could do that like that. JP Morgan in 2 vaults, one in New York and one in London, now hold more gold than the majority of the G20 countries. Just like that. And it's the largest, pretty much largest silver stockpile in the world, or one of them, on top of what they already own.